Okay, so there are basically five types of partnerships with the ABF. The most common that we've kind of addressed already is the direct funding opportunities. And I'll say more about that, and you're going to hear more about that from James as well. So I'm not going to get too deep into how you actually apply for that, but more if you do actually get awarded, what the consequences are. Basically, which is that we will put in place a special ABF Cooperative Research and Development Agreement, and I'll talk more about that agreement. And as Felix was asking, yes, projects can be funded directly by companies with private funding or non-federal funding, in which case we could use a strategic partnership project agreement or a CRADA. And this is the model CRADA from DOE, which has not been adapted to ABF. And then there's just the informal transfer of materials, data, information, et cetera, that we can put MTAs and NDAs in place for. And then there's equipment loans, but I'm not going to talk about equipment loans because I don't think that's what you're here to talk about. So let's talk first about the most important section right now, or the most important contract, which is the Department of Energy direct funded opportunities. This is where ABF, the companies work with ABF to develop a proposal in response to the DOE DFO. And companies can work with either one or several of the ABF labs, as I think Nathan already pointed out. The funding is provided to the ABF labs to conduct the statement of work, and the company provides a minimum 20% match. And that can be in kind, personnel time. We've even had licenses for strains count as in kind, cash, or a combo of the above. The awarded proposals are conducted under a DOE contract called a Collaborative Research and Development Agreement, a CRADA. And due to the extremely long CRADA negotiation times in the past, I think it was the first year or two when ABF first had these funding opportunities, it was taking many, many months to negotiate the terms of the CRADA. So what we did is we came up with a ABF specific CRADA that's used for all the ABF DFO projects, not for those projects that Felix was asking about that are funded by companies alone, but anytime there's federal funding or DOE funding, the special ABF CRADA will be used. We tried to come up with the best model terms that we could offer based on DOE restrictions. And I'll tell you a little bit about those. First of all, the ownership of biological materials. So often ABF is going to receive strains from their partner company or parts of biological materials. Typically under a DOE CRADA, those will, the new materials that are produced, not the ones provided by the company, but anything that's new that's produced under the scope of work is owned by the DOE labs. And that leads to a complication because then at the end of the project, we had to figure out, does the company want these materials that we've developed? They're probably already inserted into materials that the company owns. So we said, you know, what the heck? We would like to, at the end of the project, whatever biological materials are left over, we would like to have those split between the labs and the company, the participating company, and whoever requests those materials, if they're distributed to the parties, you automatically get title to those materials. No other agreement needed. They're just split if the company is interested in having them, and the company takes title and can do what they want, provided that there is the IP that accompanies those is properly also transferred. So this, again, does not mean that a partner DOE lab would take title to any of the biological materials or the parts provided by the company for the project. Those are provided to ABF under a separate MTA. Only the materials created under the scope of work have the shared ownership. So that's actually we had to fight for that with a little bit to get that term, but I think it simplifies things. Now, Nathan already talked about how ABF sees itself sort of as BART or as a public infrastructure that then leads to specific products and companies taking the technologies further to develop products. So we're very focused on, so my analogy is just, the rising tide lifts all boats. ABF wants to improve and help companies in the bioeconomy more broadly. The tools for engineering non-model microbes are usually useful broadly, and they can be platforms. And the platforms to accelerate DBTL can be very broad. DOE also wants to maximize the use of the technologies developed with federal funding. On the other hand, we are very aware that companies need IP to actually ensure their investment that they're going to actually make in producing a product. So we want to also give you some gas to get your project out of the harbor and get you some long-term confidence that you have some protection in competitive waters. And we have thought very hard about how to balance these two needs, which are not exactly harmonious all the time. So what the DFO CRADA offers is two options for options. And if you don't know what an option is, some of you may not have negotiated IP terms before. It's basically reserving a license. It's sort of a placeholder for an ultimate license agreement. So under the CRADA, IP ownership follows inventorship. The labs own what their employees invent. The company owns what their employees invent. Joint inventions are jointly owned. For lab-owned inventions developed under the DFO scope of work, the company can choose between two IP license options. You can either get a 6-month no-cost option to an exclusive license in a defined field of use with reasonable terms, and we usually don't pre-negotiate the licensing terms, but we're obligated to offer reasonable terms. Or you can get an 18-month no-cost option to a non-exclusive license in all fields of use with reasonable terms. So for the platform technologies, we really are trying to incent people to maybe choose the non-exclusive license, especially if they don't know what their particular end product is going to be. Maybe you're developing a host organism and you're not sure what your end product will be. Then you can get the non-exclusive license, and we can also offer that to other people, other companies that might be developing things in that host organism, as an example. If you really, really need exclusive rights, we are probably going to hold you to a defined field of use that makes sense for your company, that allows your company to have the IP terms that it needs for products that you have or are contemplating seriously, but not something that you're just contemplating broadly, I would say. The company has 45 days from the time the lab-owned invention is disclosed to the tech transfer office to select which option it would like to take. If you know you want one or the other, you can, upfront negotiate the field of use, if your choice is for the exclusive license. And this new CRADA is kind of an experiment. We really are open to your feedback and your ideas about how you think we could best balance those two, those goals. We're open to other structures. And we want to innovate in tech transfer and in this area within the DOE requirements, which are quite complicated sometimes. But we really do want to innovate in this area as well as innovating in the sciences. So let's move on to the idea of if you just want to skip the DFO process and you really want to just fund ABF directly based on something that your company needs to advance, you can partner with the ABF using non-federal funding under a negotiable CRADA or a strategic partnership program agreement. Like I said before, the DFO CRADA is non-negotiable because of the time it takes to negotiate those in the past. But if you're actually funding a CRADA, then you get to negotiate it. So what's the difference between an SPP and a CRADA? An SPP is usually a shorter term project that's unlikely to generate IP. Usually the company owns the background IP and they want ABF to perform some well-defined work. If the company is, it's strange that it's called a strategic partnership program. Frankly, DOE names it that, but it's usually actually more tactical. CRADAs are usually more strategic. But anyway, name aside, if the company is US majority owned, the company will take title to any lab generated inventions. So that's an advantage over the CRADA. The company would actually, if you happen to develop IP at the lab, then the company would take title. If you're not US majority owned though, the labs take title and they may choose to offer some limited licensing rights, but that is going to be subject to DOE approval. Under an SPP, the company also provides the labs with general indemnity. I know some companies have actually chosen the CRADA because of that. But anyway, so a CRADA is actually a true collaboration and joint problem solving. The company can also embed employees at the lab, whichever lab you're working with, which you cannot do under an SPP. IP ownership follows inventorship, but again, the company gets an option to an exclusive license in an agreed upon field of use. Now you can, the company may choose, they may get the option to the exclusive and then ultimately say, we don't really want an exclusive. We don't want to pay for an exclusive. We're fine with the non-exclusive. So you can also choose that. And there's no general indemnification under a CRADA agreement. We also welcome these informal collaborations for the purpose of sharing materials, data, information. Nathan and Phil have mentioned how we try to talk with industry to get feedback on what our future projects should be. And I know the researchers and especially the strategic leads in ABF have a lot of contacts in industry and they want to keep engaged with you. Anyway, so we can have those under no agreement at all or NDAs or MTAs, and happy to get that. We also might want to put those in place to plan future projects. So what are some of the non-obvious benefits of working with ABF? I think people maybe underplay these in some ways, but I've been at the Berkeley lab 20 years now. As I was reminded today, I got my 20-year pin, which kind of just makes you feel old, but it also makes you feel like you've seen a lot. And I will say that people working with the more applied side of the labs, their platforms are very well informed by industry needs. They provide commercially relevant results. The IP that comes out is very practical and it has a very strong branding with investors. If you're a startup company or a mid-sized company and you're still looking for investors, the DOE labs, have very strong branding. So you may have to actually initiate a license, and our license terms, by the way, our goal is to get a fair return for the taxpayer, not to get every penny off the table. It's to get the technology out and used and get a fair return, not an optimized return necessarily. Also, you build positive reputation with DOE and the participating labs when you have a successful project with like the Agile BioFoundry, the ABPDU, or any of these other more applied programs. If you have a successful project, to be honest, you're going to be looked upon more favorably in the future, or I wouldn't say more favorably, you will be looked upon favorably if you have a strong proposal in the future because you're building a reputation for making good on what you've done with the labs. Also, the CRADAs can provide excellent staff training opportunities. Just as an example, the Joint Bioenergy Institute has had a partnership with Total Gas and Oil for, I guess, 11 or 12 years now. And they have located 1 or 2 researchers at in the same facility that ABF is located in for that long. And it's been a fantastic collaboration. They've trained people, they've advanced people, and they're definitely building their biology. They've built their biology program on some of that training. The other thing is you get exposure to these cutting edge tools that you may decide that you want or don't want based on your interaction with ABF. So you can make more informed purchasing decisions in the future. So just some extra benefit for your dollar. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.